Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Tanner, and this is Max,
Ayo.
and welcome to episode 3 of The Rabbit Hole.
And we are on a roll.
3. That's
The big three, as
big
they
3.
say.
Yeah, it is. Is that a podcasting thing?
Yeah, you know what? All my guys in the industry, they say, you know what? The third one's the big one.
Once you get your 3rd episode, you're basically a star.
Yeah. Yeah, so check us out on like the top 100 on Apple.
I'm expecting a check soon. Big check.
Yeah, I'm actually quitting my job, and I'm going to retire on these benefits and the royalties.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I'm going to do that too. Yeah, so 3rd episode, we're planning to attempt to release an episode every other Friday.
This is the loosest possible binding statement we can give, but that's our goal.
It's because we released one 2 Fridays ago, and we're going to try to release one this Friday, so we're just going to call that our schedule.
Yep, works for me.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think, again, I feel like we've mentioned this before, I actually think when we're going back to work full-time, it'll be easier.
Yeah, definitely.
My schedule is just literally whatever I want it to be right now.
I honestly don't have a schedule. Sometimes I'll need to go do specific things, but most of the time, my schedule for the next day is, maybe I'll wake up around this time, and then I'll maybe get these things done.
And it's like, if I want to work at 9 p.m. on my laptop, I can, and go do things throughout the day. So I think when we're going into work full time, we'll be able to give you guys a set for sure schedule. But at the moment, we're going to aim for every other Friday, because honestly, we're just kind of too lazy to do it every week. Because I don't want it to become a job.
Yeah.
It's really fun, but if we're stressing over getting the research done.
Yeah, if I have to skip out on seeing people or doing things, oh sorry man, I gotta go research for the podcast. Right. I feel like that'll kind of detract from what makes it fun.
It'll just make it less fun.
Yeah.
And then as we're going through it in this too, I'm gonna be well, here's this and here's that, because I'm just going through the motions. So every other Friday seems like a good amount to keep it fun.
Yep. So you guys know the drill. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify now. Check us out on both.
Yes, sir.
If you can't find them, the link is in our Instagram bio at the.rabbitholepod.
Yeah, we got a link tree because we're official.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what they also say, after the big 3, the next step is your link tree.
Well, we got that done before.
Yep.
Okay, so guys, we were incorrect at the end of the last podcast. We did not fix the weird noise jump in audio that keeps happening. We don't know what it is anymore.
I think it's electronic interference somehow.
We thought it was us tapping the table, but last night we were kind of testing some things out, and even trying to recreate those noises, and we couldn't do it. But just in case, we have the microphone on some foam. We have the wire suspended on some foam off the table.
Everything is insulated.
So if we have that issue again, I'm going to say we just call the mic company and be like, do you guys know what's happening? Because I am not a microphone expert.
Yeah.
They'll probably have a better idea than we will.
Well, should we get into it?
Might as well get into it.
All right, so this week we're going to be talking about the Bermuda Triangle, or as I knew it as a child, the 3rd most leading cause of death in everybody's life.
Yep.
Preceded only by anvils and pianos falling out of the sky and quicksand.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Just based on cartoons and what you hear about when you're young, Bermuda Triangle, I thought it was going to be a problem in my life.
I thought it was going to be a huge problem. Yeah.
I actually did think quicksand was going to be a genuine issue. It felt based on anything I ever watched, that it was just everywhere.
Yeah.
I've never seen it in my life.
Yeah, so I guess there's 2 really big categories that we're going to go over, and that being aviation incidents and then maritime incidents. Yep. So I think Tanner and I will both go over a big one, and then we'll kind of talk about some smaller ones.
Yeah, well, I guess we can say what the Bermuda Triangle is. I'm sure every single person has heard of it. Yeah. It's basically just a triangle drawn out in the Atlantic Ocean between, what is it? It's
Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I think it's specifically San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So it's it's not a specific geographical thing is it formed like that. It's just the triangle is drawn because that's kind of the area that a lot of weird stuff seems to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's really no significance to where it is outside of that.
That's the area that gets kind of suspicious with this kind of thing.
And it's very heavily traveled for flights and for boats. So you'd expect more proportionate crashes to the amount of stuff that's going on there, but it's the circumstances of the accidents.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
They're not normal.
Statistically, it's not a huge anomaly, but the circumstances
Yeah.
they just get so weird.
The weird things that seem to go down during the incident is not like anything that happens anywhere else. That is not supposed to be happening. Like with the magnetic poles, for instance, it shouldn't be going on right there, but it does.
Yeah.
And other places like that it's supposed to, it would happen, but you'd be aware of that.
Right.
All right, should we just go ahead and get into the first one?
Let's just jump into it.
All right. So the first one I'm going to go ahead and talk about is, I think it's the first like major recorded incident.
Yeah, it's very well documented.
Yeah, very well.
Especially in aviation.
I like left out a good amount of detail that just isn't. It's important if you're like trying to figure something out, I guess. But it's like specific headings, like that type of stuff, like specific latitudes and longitudes at any given time. Like it's not totally necessary, so I left a lot of it out. But like, there's a lot of detail about this one, and it's kind of the first one that was at least like well recorded or well documented.
Yeah. Honestly, if we went through all the details, we could make this specific story an hour long.
Yeah, I cut out a lot of stuff just because I was sitting there and I was like, I mean, I guess that's good information, but it's not like relevant to if you're looking at the crash itself. Like if you're trying to figure out what went wrong, then maybe, but that's not really the point.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. So this is called Flight 19. So Flight 19 was a group of 5 General Motors TBM Avenger torpedo bombers.
God, that's a badass name.
It's a badass name. Any aircraft nerds listening, this was technically a Grumman aircraft, but since it was during World War II, GM had a wartime production license.
And that was the last time they made a quality vehicle.
I mean, was it quality? I think
they
a
did
lot
crash.
Of them crashed. But yeah, I'm sure no one else cares about that. But just in case there's a plane nerd. Because we were interested about that.
Yeah.
As we were reading through it, like it kept showing up as like 2 different things, and we were like, so what kind of plane is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, these are bombers meant for targeting ships. They ended up disappearing over the Bermuda Triangle on December 5th, 1945, so right towards the end of World War II.
Past the end of World War II.
Past the end of World War II, really, yeah. The flight took off from the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale, lost contact with the base, and then eventually disappeared. All 14 of the airmen involved in Flight 19 were lost in this incident. And then also a Martin PBM Mariner flying boat that went to search for Flight 19 that same night, also lost all 13 of its crew members when it went down over the ocean. So this aircraft, the flying boat, was actually known to accumulate flammable gas vapors in the bilges, which Max can tell you what a bilge is.
It's a boat thing. So anytime... I guess just boats in general, they have pumps at the bottom of the hull that pump out water, and that's just called a bilge pump.
Okay, I mean, I've seen them.
Yeah.
I'm a big boat guy, though.
If you ever see a little stream of water coming out the bottom of the boat, that's just a bilge pump.
So the thing that puts the stream of water out the boat, apparently this plane was known to get gas vapors in there, which seems like an oversight to keep flying it if they know it happens.
If somebody told me there was gas vapors just chilling in my aircraft, would not take off.
Flammable. Especially they're like, these are flammable gas. I mean, they all are, but like...
I just want to know, like, what that conversation went like. Like, hey man, yeah, the plane's good to fly. It might blow up. You're probably okay.
Overall, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It went down over the ocean, and investigators assumed that this like flammable gas issue was the reason why. It was never confirmed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then no one really like questioned that. They just assumed it. No one confirmed it. People were like, okay. So I find it a little bit strange that assumption is made, and that everybody takes it as like fact because of like the circumstances of how the Flight 19 went down, and no one could find it, and then this plane looking for them also went down.
So the flying boat was never definitively discerned how or why it crashed.
Yeah. So they saw flames, but they don't know for sure if that's what went if that is what happened.
Okay.
They just said I don't know, sometimes they blow up. And we're like, okay.
All right.
And then along with that, Navy investigators have not ever been able to determine the actual cause of the loss of Flight 19 itself, and none of the 5 aircraft from that flight have ever been found.
Sus.
Yeah, a little bit suspicious. So Flight 19 was actually meant to be a routine navigation and combat training exercise. It was essentially an exercise that was meant to combine bombing and navigation into one flight. So other flights had already completed this training exercise earlier that day, and more flights were scheduled to do so after Flight 19 as well. So this wasn't like a one-off flight. They had done multiple already with the same exact flight path, and they were planning on doing more. So they didn't see any issue with the flight path, stuff that like planes had already flown.
So presumably same flight conditions then, because if
yeah,
well, I got to believe if somebody had already made that flight, then it would have been noted if things were deteriorating or there was inclement weather.
So it's like odd the issues they ran into, and no one else had them.
Okay.
Yeah. So the flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Taylor of the U.S. Navy, a man who had around 2,500 flying hours, and they were mostly in this type of aircraft. The rest of the pilots were actually trainees, and they had about 300 flying hours.
That's still pretty notable, though.
About 60 of those hours were in this specific type of aircraft as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't like it was a new aircraft to either of them, especially the leader. But even the trainees, like 60 hours in one type of aircraft isn't a small amount.
Indonesian Airlines will hire him.
So the flight leader, Taylor, had also completed a combat tour in the Pacific Theater as a torpedo bomber pilot. So he'd flown in actual combat. I'm pretty sure it was in a similar aircraft, like similar type of aircraft.
Yeah.
So not only he's just like flown a lot, he's flown in a very stressful environment.
Also over the water, so I gotta believe that he knows how to navigate well.
Yeah. And these trainee pilots had recently completed other training missions in the same area with no issues. So they were flying in the same area and didn't experience any of these problems either.
So he was familiar with the aircraft and the area.
I don't think the leader was familiar with the area.
Okay.
Because I think he had actually recently flown into the base.
Okay.
But the trainees were familiar with the area.
Got it.
And the leader was just a very well-experienced pilot.
Okay.
So during the pre-flight checks of the aircraft, it was actually found that all 5 of the aircraft were missing clocks, which is kind of weird. But
interesting.
Yeah. They didn't see it as a problem, though, because they assumed all of the pilots would be wearing watches, because all pilots wear watches.
That is true.
So it's weird they didn't have clocks, but they were just like, whatever, they're all going to have watches on.
So, yeah, that's actually interesting. Now if you take off a flight going through like any inclement weather, your plane is legally required to have a clock.
Yeah. I mean, and they noted that they didn't have clocks either, so they must have been like, that's odd.
Okay.
Especially that all 5 of them were missing clocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, okay, so they had watches. So
they assumed they all had watches. I never saw anywhere that confirmed all of the pilots were wearing watches.
I would assume they did.
I would assume they did as well, because they're pilots and they all wear watches. So the navigation part of this exercise was the reason they needed clocks specifically. It was meant to teach dead reckoning, which Max can explain what that is in a second, but basically it involves knowing elapsed time, which is why they noted that they were missing clocks. But then they were like, but also they'll be wearing watches. But Max can just explain what dead reckoning is for a second.
I'm like your dictionary over here.
Yeah.
So essentially dead reckoning is just a navigation technique where you know that you take off from point A, you fly a certain heading at a certain speed for a certain amount of time, and then theoretically that should put you over point B like at this time. And then you just kind of build point after point based on your heading and speed and time.
Yeah, heading means direction, by the way.
Yep, direction. North, south, east,
Not
west.
everybody knows what heading means. But yeah, so basically that's what dead reckoning is. And the reason the clock thing was brought up at all is because you use time to kind of figure things out.
Time, speed, and direction.
So yeah, but again, they were assuming that they'd all be wearing watches, so it wasn't really a big problem. The flight ended up taking off at 2:10 in the afternoon, and the weather was described as, quote, favorable, sea state moderate to rough. So the skies were clear, the ocean itself was a little bit choppy,
okay,
but like the weather, like the skies were clear.
Okay.
So clear skies and a very experienced flight leader, and all of this like still went down.
It's also a large flight too. What, 5 aircraft?
5 aircraft.
Yeah.
That's not crazy. I mean, 4 ships common.
Yeah, but I mean just that there's a lot of combined. There's a lot of airmen in that specific flight.
There are.
So a lot of, I guess, just resources.
Yeah,
for
I was assuming
management.
the reason they did it like that is because when they do bombing runs in combat, I was guessing they did it as 5s.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true, but I would assume because part of this was bombing.
I'm not saying it's unusual. I'm just saying there are a lot of airmen in that
There
flight.
are 14 among the 5 aircraft.
Yeah.
Moving on to during the flight. So some radio conversations between the pilots were actually picked up by the base and also by some other aircraft in the area. So the bombing part of the exercise is known to have been completed right around 3 because a pilot requested and was given permission to drop his last bomb right around that time.
Okay.
So they had no more bombs on board.
Okay.
Which is like, it was never really brought up, but that was significant to me because it meant that couldn't have caused it. Like that couldn't have like blown up and caused them to go down.
Sure.
it doesn't really ever, like, come up as a theory that that's what happened.
Yeah.
But if they didn't know that they dropped all their bombs, it definitely could be something people were thinking.
Sure.
Yeah. So 40 minutes later, around 3:40, another Lieutenant Robert Cox, who was a flight instructor... You gonna laugh at that last name?
Nope.
You smiled.
Yeah. I wasn't going to open my mouth.
Okay, so you weren't going to open your mouth for Robert Cox?
Shut up.
Okay, so
Tell me the damn story.
This guy, Robert Cox, was a flight instructor, and he was meant to be leading one of the flights that was supposed to be flying later than Flight 19. So he was at Fort Lauderdale at the base, kind of, I don't know if he was prepping or just hanging out, because I don't know when his flight actually was.
Okay.
Waiting to do his flight. So he actually overheard an unidentified transmission. One of the crew members from Flight 19, not an identified one, but one of the crew members asked one of the pilots, whose name was Powers, or probably his last name, asked him for his compass reading. Powers responded, quote, "I don't know where we are. We must have got lost after that last turn." So he didn't tell him a compass reading, which kind of implies his compass wasn't working. So Cox attempted to contact the pilot Powers and help him out, but Powers didn't respond. So I don't know if that's the transmission didn't go through. I wouldn't think he would just ignore it. So yeah, there's a lot of situations during this where the base tried to contact the pilots and they never responded.
They just never heard
But they
back.
could hear them talking to each other.
Okay.
Which it was almost like their transmission was getting out, but they could only, for some reason, communicate with each other.
I wonder if that might be a radio transmission thing, though, because a lot of times the land-based radios are a lot more powerful than the ones they have on the ships.
Yeah, I don't think it's like a creaky part of the story. Like,
Okay.
it makes sense.
Just notable.
It was just like there's multiple times when they tried to contact the pilots and there was no response, but they could continue to hear them talking to each other.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was Powers, who was just one of the trainee pilots, saying they didn't know where they were. Essentially, his compass probably wasn't working because he didn't give the reading. So yeah, then Cox tried to help him, but he didn't respond. Cox then contacted Taylor, who was the flight leader, and asked him what the trouble was. Taylor replied to Cox and said, "Both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys," meaning the Florida Keys, "but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." So both of his compasses were out, which is very weird.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about that. That just shouldn't happen.
And already by this point, like, they're kind of lost because he thinks, well, he says, "I'm sure I'm over the Keys," but he doesn't actually know. So
Okay.
who knows how long, like, his compasses have been out for.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know how to get back, essentially. So So both his compasses are out. That trainee's compass is out, which kind of makes the assumption all of their compasses were out.
Something's going on.
Yeah. So Cox told Taylor to put the sun on his port and fly north up the coast. So if you're in the Keys, if you're in the Florida Keys, basically going north gets you to Florida.
Yep.
So that's what Cox told him to do. Base operations contacted Taylor and asked if his aircraft was equipped with IFF, which is Identification Friend or Foe. It's essentially a signal that sends out a code, and if, like, the base receives the code and it's the same as the one they have, it's like, it's a friendly.
Yeah.
It wasn't being used for that situation, but that's just what IFF is. In this situation, they were basically just saying they could use that transmission to triangulate his position for him and kind of guide him home. But Taylor never acknowledged this message from the base. Apparently, he later radioed them and told them that his IFF was active, but they never saw that, and it didn't happen right. He didn't respond to this specific message.
Okay.
So at this point, Taylor then radioed his heading and so his direction and planned a time going that direction. I don't remember the heading, but I think it's basically I'm going to go with this heading for like 10 minutes. So he kind of was just trying to let the base know what his plan was. But during that time, so that 10 minutes, they could never get a bearing on his flight, and they weren't picking up any IFF from that direction either, even though it was supposedly active.
Wild.
Yeah. Taylor was then asked to broadcast at a specific frequency, which he never acknowledged. And then he was asked to broadcast at the search and rescue frequency, to which he replied, quote, "I cannot switch frequencies. I must keep my planes intact."
What?
So there's no radio transmission about what's going on, but clearly something's wrong.
That That message makes no sense to me.
Yeah, why can't you switch frequencies? Like, it's like that, something that serious is happening that you can't take the time to switch frequencies.
I'm almost more hung up on I must keep my planes intact. What does that even mean?
That's what I mean. Like, he never like said what was going on, but like from that message you can kind of infer like there's something happening that is like concerning a man of this experience as a like pilot.
Ah, that's weird.
So that message in itself just like tweaked me a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's like he's like so concerned about something that's going on that he didn't switch frequencies.
Yeah, and there also just wasn't more detail given.
He was just like, I can't do it, like, otherwise my planes are gonna like crash or fall apart somehow.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit weird. So what happened next, essentially, was the base attempting to contact Flight 19, being unsuccessful on multiple occasions, but they still picked up a few of their communications before the flight just totally disappeared. So the base picked up Taylor giving directions to the rest of the trainee pilots in his flight to head east for 10 minutes. The base also picked up one of the other pilots, so one of the trainees, saying, quote, "Damn it, if we could just fly west, we would get home. Head west, damn it." So that's interesting.
Okay, yeah. If you're in the Keys and you're trying to find Fort Lauderdale, both of which are on the east side of Florida, why would you fly further east if you were overland at some point?
Don't know. And I also don't think I don't think they were ever overland except for those islands, which weren't the Keys.
Right.
Based on where they think everything went down. But I also don't know, because again, like, it sounds like everybody's compass is out. I think they were just fucking lost.
Yeah.
Like, he said head west, and he was probably correct, but he also might have just been fully guessing. The only thing is that the trainee pilots actually had more recent time in that area than the leader did.
Yeah.
But either way, he's going to familiarize himself and know that, like, if he needs to be flying east or west.
Yeah, I feel like at that point it's just a common sense thing. Like, all right, we're over water, we're in trouble, head towards land, which is west.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Because I think at one point, I didn't include it because it was part of that big heading thing, but he mentioned, like, trying not to get over the Gulf of Mexico. So I think he thought they were farther west than they were.
Oh, okay.
Because their compasses were out, and he thought he was in the Keys, which is not where they actually were.
Okay.
So I think he thought they went into the Gulf of Mexico, and they actually went on the east side of Florida, which means they should have headed west, but he thought they needed to be heading east.
Okay, I see what's going on.
Yeah. But one of the trainees seemed to have an idea, but again, you don't, like, there's no way of knowing if he knew for sure, or if he was just like, I'm pretty sure we're going the wrong fucking way. So at this point, the weather kind of started to deteriorate a little bit. They'd been out there for like a while, and like the radio contact became sparse. The base was picking up less and less. At one point, though, Taylor was heard saying, "We'll fly 270 degrees, which is west, until landfall or running out of gas." So that was west. But later on, he was heard saying he didn't think they had actually flown far enough east. So he was just basically confused about where they were. And I'm just assuming this whole time they've been over water, because the moment you hit land in a situation like this, you're going to try to land. So basically they've just been flying over water for who knows how long, probably 3 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours at this point.
Okay.
And they're just confused about where they are. They don't know how to get back. And they're just kind of, my guess is he said, we'll fly west. They flew west, and I'm guessing they just didn't get to land. And then he was like, well, fuck. We didn't go far enough east then. Taylor's last transmission came around 6:20. This is a weird little thing. Some people say it came at 6:20. Some people say it came at 7:04. I don't know why there's a discrepancy.
Those are also very specific.
Yeah. I never found anything about like why people differed on that.
Okay.
Or like if it really matters. But some say 6:20, some say 7:04. But his last transmission was this. So, quote, "All planes close up tight will have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." So at that point, they're desperate.
That's the end of Flight 19. That's all we know that happened.
That's when the flight itself, that was his last transmission, and from then on, nothing is known. No, they've never found it. They never, like, there's no more radio transmission. It was just that last transmission about, it was clearly a desperate, well, we're going down as a team, like as a squadron.
Did they find, like, anything from the flight?
From what I read, they found 0 things that can be identified from Flight 19.
Man.
Yeah. And so later that night, after it had gotten dark, two Martin PBM Mariner flying boats, which were actually scheduled to be doing a training flight of their own, ended up being diverted to search for Flight 19. They were given like a longitude and latitude as a general region to search. One of the aircraft, the one that went down, took off at 7:27, called in a routine radio message at 7:30, and then was never heard from again.
What is going on?
Yeah.
In Florida right now?
Yeah.
Or in and at 45.
At 9:15, so 2 hours later, essentially, a tanker ship reported flames from an apparent explosion. And they reported the flames were reaching like 100 feet in the air for like 10 minutes. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And that's also 2 hours after their last call-in. So that's just like, I don't know if that was even ever confirmed to be, I don't think it was ever confirmed to actually be the flying boat, because no survivors were ever found.
Yeah,
the search went and looked for survivors. That ship did, and they never found any.
I don't know what crash can give you flames that high for that long.
Yeah,
and also the fact that they just disappeared.
Yeah,
like from radio 3 minutes after.
Yeah, and then nothing ever again. So that's like another super weird thing. The reason it's assumed that this was that aircraft is because the spot where the crash was like right in that region they were told to be searching.
It was in the search grid?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's assumed to be that aircraft, but nothing was ever confirmed. They found no survivors at all. And I don't think they recovered any pieces of the aircraft that were identified, could be identified as any certain aircraft actually.
Okay.
The USS Solomons reported losing radar contact with an aircraft at the same position in time. So they were tracking an aircraft.
Okay.
And lost it. But that was kind of vague too. I was trying to find more detail on that, but kind of two different sources kind of said the same thing.
Okay.
The Solomons had a radar thing at the same time, but I don't know if by at the same time that means 9:15 or 7:30. Because 7:30 is when they disappeared from, no one could contact them again, but 9:15 is when that boat saw it.
Okay.
Yeah, but either way, basically, a ship said it had them on radar in that region and lost it.
Okay. Lining
up with either, around the 7:30 or the 9:15. That was kind of, not descriptive. So that's assumed to be that boat ship, flying boat, whatever they call it. Flying boat.
Yeah, works for me.
But I don't think it was ever confirmed.
Okay.
So there have actually been, many aircraft found off the coast of Florida of the same, the Avenger. But out of all of the ones that are found, they thought multiple were from Flight 19, but then after looking at the tail numbers, none of them ever matched. So,
wild.
Yeah. I think they found 4? I think they found 4 or 5 Avengers off the coast of Florida.
And just none of them were the same one?
None of them were the same tail number.
Wow.
Yeah. So that basically means all 5 of those aircraft and all 14 of the airmen disappeared with 0 trace and also no evidence as to what actually caused the issues or what actually made them go down. Besides running out of gas, I guess.
Yeah.
But the issues they were having, there's no reason that all of their compasses should be going out.
Yeah, that's so weird to me. Even the fact that they had 2 compasses, they were both going haywire. Planes now have just regular magnetic compasses, even with a fully electronic display. They still have regular magnetic compasses because if you have a complete total power failure, that compass will still work.
Yes. That's the weird thing. And that's what we were talking about earlier. So there's been multiple stories. I don't know if any of yours have the same compass issue. Where compasses have problems in that area. Yeah. No, they've never, science or whatever, has never found issues in that area of why it should be happening.
No.
And you can't replicate it. You can't just go and your compass will mess up. It just does sometimes.
Yeah, there's specific errors that are associated with compasses.
Yeah.
For example, if you accelerate or decelerate, it'll twitch a little bit, it'll move a little bit, but then it'll settle back.
Right.
Or if you start a turn from the north or the south, it'll kind of lag behind or speed up, but it'll always settle where you're going. They don't just sit and spin.
Yeah.
And the fact that both of them are doing that.
It's weird. The whole magnetic or compass, whatever issue going on in that area just doesn't make any sense. Because we know where those spots are in the world.
Yeah.
Where compasses get affected by that type of thing. And it's not there.
Yeah, you can state definitively by so many scientific studies that there's no reason that there should be a magnetic anomaly right there.
Yeah. But there seems to be kind of a lot.
Man, that's just so bizarre.
Yeah, so that's the end of Flight 19. Like I said, it's pretty well documented. I left out a lot of the boring details, if that's what you want to call them.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the overall, the transmissions that were heard, the general timeline, kind of what happened. which no one really knows what happened. There's like we found a couple pictures that were like, here's where they think they went, but like that's never been confirmed because they never found them.
Yeah. Oh man, that's fun. I remember like seeing documentaries and stuff of Flight 19 back even when I was a kid. I've kind of like always known about that, and just the fact that they got up and disappeared without a trace is beyond.
And then the search plane went down.
Yeah,
like that's another weird part about that. It makes you just think like something weird had to have happened.
Oh, for sure.
Like it wasn't normal.
So kind of following Tanner's aviation theme, there's a couple other notable aviation ones. One is pretty well documented because the pilot like went through it and survived and was very eager to do interviews. And then a couple others are just like, again, strange disappearances. So kind of getting into it, the first one I'm going to talk about is a pilot named Bruce Guernin. He was flying from the Bahamas to Florida. So this one is actually kind of unique because, like I said, first of all, he survived, but also what he described is just bizarre.
And it's like, honestly, surviving is very rare.
Yeah.
And a lot of these like crazy crashes where like weird shit happen, no one survives.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll get into this as I tell the story, but what he describes also physically just doesn't make sense. Like his positioning does not make sense physically. Essentially, the pilot, Bruce, claims to have experienced something that no one has ever talked about. And maybe other people have experienced it, but no one's survived it.
They didn't live.
Told the story. So the flight was in December of 1970, I think December 4th. And it originated in Andros Airport in the Bahamas at 3:01 p.m. is when they took off.
Okay.
So they were heading to Palm Beach, Florida, which is about 250 miles. Bruce had over 600 flight hours by the time he was in his early 20s when this happened, because he and his dad built a successful real estate brokerage in Florida. So he spent quite a bit of time flying back and forth between Florida and the Bahamas.
So he was rich.
Yeah.
It must be nice.
It's like all the stories like, oh, we built a $1 million company from scratch. All it took was a $1 million inheritance from my dad.
Oh my God.
So he had 600 flight hours. He'd been back and forth between the islands multiple times. And then they were flying a brand new Beechcraft Bonanza, which honestly is still super common today. Like if you go to any general aviation airport, you can usually find a couple.
Yeah.
He also noted that the weather was clear. They took off, and right after takeoff, they noticed a huge cloud right in front of them. So I don't know if this just materialized or if they just missed it.
He noted the weather was clear.
Yeah.
But it seems like not like something you would miss because it sounds like it was fucking big.
Yeah. So I guess it started growing too as they started flying through it. But he also claimed that the Miami controller or Miami radio said that the weather was clear there. So they decided, all right, we'll just fly through this and we'll be fine. Yeah. So they climbed through it for about 10 minutes and emerged at around 11,000 feet, which honestly is a pretty normal altitude for a flight like that.
Yeah.
He later told an interviewer, soon we noticed another cloud building directly in front of us near the Bimini Islands. It looked a great deal like the cloud we had just left, except that the top was at least 60,000 feet high. So when we came within a few miles of it, we saw that it appeared to emanate directly from the surface of the Earth.
So he's saying there's a cloud that went from the ocean to 60,000 feet.
Yeah.
And this one, so the first one, he kind of like, they took off and they're like, oh, there's a big cloud. But this one, basically, they were like, it wasn't there, and then it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty weird.
Yeah, and then it, kind of as he goes on to tell about it, it sounds like it just kept growing and growing and growing at an astonishing rate. So when they took off, it wasn't much of an issue, but then it just devolved rapidly.
Yeah.
They noticed that it was coming from the surface of the Earth, which in and of itself is super weird.
Yeah.
And so they decided to just keep flying because Miami was clear, or so they were told.
Yeah.
So he went on to say, upon entering the cloud, we witnessed an uncanny spectacle. It became dark and black without rain, and visibility was about 4 or 5 miles. And I mean, side note here.
In a cloud?
In a cloud, that's super weird because visibility should be like 50 to 100 feet.
Yeah, 5 miles in a cloud is far as fuck.
Yeah. So they flew into this cloud and they could see for a couple miles.
You're telling me the cloud was 5 miles? Clouds aren't that fucking big.
I don't know, man.
This cloud's weird as fuck. 5? Okay.
Yeah. It gets worse, trust me. So there were no lightning bolts, he claimed, and goes on to say that only extraordinarily bright white flashes that would illuminate the entire surrounding area. The deeper we penetrated, the more intense the flashes became, so we made a 135-degree turn to the left and headed due south out of the cloud. After emerging from the cloud, he saw it continued in a huge ring circling back to where they had just taken off from. So when he describes it basically as a donut. So they took off, they flew through the first cloud, kept going, and then flew into the second cloud that appeared kind of out of nowhere, going from the surface of the Earth to 60,000 feet.
Yeah.
They started going through that, and things got real weird real quick.
Yeah.
So they diverted, flew out of the cloud, and now they were surrounded by a ring.
Yeah, they're basically
of clouds.
They weren't in any clouds, but they were surrounded fully by clouds.
Yeah. So at this point, they had just started flying, hoping that they would see a break.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say that 13 miles later, I noticed a large U-shaped opening on the west side of the donut cloud, which conveniently is where they needed to go anyway. He goes, I had no choice but to turn and try to exit through the opening. As we approached, we watched the top ends of the U-gap join, forming a hole. The break in the cloud now formed a perfect horizontal tunnel, 1 mile wide and more than 10 miles long. We could see clear blue sky on the other side.
That's weird as fuck.
Yep.
That's not how clouds work.
No, it's not. That interview goes on to say, we also saw the tunnel was rapidly shrinking. I increased the engine RPM, bringing our speed to the caution area of 230 miles per hour. When we entered the tunnel, its diameter had narrowed to only 200 feet.
Holy shit. Yeah. So 230 in an aircraft like that's pretty fast.
Yeah, it is. So the normal Bonanza cruise is like 195. And that's miles per hour, not knots, too.
Yeah.
And then 230 is like pretty much redlining the engine.
You're like, full fucking bore.
Yeah, he firewalled it and tried to get home.
I mean, it's the only...
I would too.
Yeah, I would too. It's wild, though.
Yeah, so they're flying through this tunnel that had narrowed to only 200 feet, which sounds kind of terrifying.
It sounds scary as shit.
Once they entered, I was amazed at what the shaft now looked like. It appeared to be only a mile long instead of the 10 plus I'd originally estimated. The walls were perfectly round and slowly constricting.
So it went from 1 mile wide and 10 miles long to 200 feet wide and 1 mile long.
According to Bruce, yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. It's not how it works, man.
That's not normal. And also, I thought kind of it would go it got really constricted but stayed the same length. It's the fact that it shrunk both ways is kind of...
It was also shrinking uniformly, too, which, I mean, everyone's seen clouds. That's not how...
No, it's not. Clouds don't do anything uniform.
Yeah. So we were in the tunnel for only 20 seconds, he goes on to say, before we emerged from the other end. For about 5 seconds, I had the strange feeling of weightlessness and an increased forward momentum. What? When I looked back, I gasped to see the tunnel collapse. All of our electronic and magnetic navigational instruments were malfunctioning. The compass was slowly spinning even as the airplane flew straight. I contacted Miami and told them we were about 45 miles southeast of Bimini, heading east at 10,500 feet. The radar controller replied that he was unable to identify us anywhere in that area. Something bizarre had happened. Instead of the blue sky we expected, everything was a dull grayish-white haze. Initially, when they entered the tunnel, they saw blue on the other end, and now that they're out of it, everything's a dull white haze.
Yeah, it's also a couple weird things happen. The weightlessness thing is very weird.
Yeah, it's like they were just suddenly accelerating, but he didn't note any... I mean, first of all, the plane was redlined.
He was as fast as it could be going.
Yeah.
And then also the fact that he told them where he was, and they couldn't find him.
Yeah.
It's pretty odd.
Definitely. Once they got out, and they were in this dull white haze, he described it as the visibility seemed like more than 2 miles, yet we could not see the ocean, the horizon, or the sky. The air was very stable, and there was no lightning or rain. I refer to this as an electronic fog because it seemed to be what was interfering with our instruments.
Yeah, it was just the compass was fucking up.
Yeah, and the electronic instruments.
Yeah. And electronic stuff can fuck up randomly sometimes, but again, the compass can't. Right. It can't do it. It's not based on electronics. Yeah. So, yeah, just the whole compass thing always throws me for a loop. Also, the 2 mile visibility, sort of, but they can't see any notable features. Yeah. Like sky, horizon, or ocean. They can't see any of them. Yeah. So that's weird.
And they were at 10,500 feet, so definitely should have been able to see the ocean at the very least. Yeah. Just a weird... It's almost like they're in a bubble, and they just... they're isolated from everything. So he describes the timeline as We were in the electronic fog for 3 minutes when the controller radioed that he had identified an airplane directly over Miami Beach flying due west. Now keep in mind, Miami Beach is 250 miles from where they took off.
Yep.
And they've been in the air for like half an hour.
Yeah.
And this is a small plane. It's not fast.
Yeah, they're not going 500 miles an hour.
He claims, I looked at my watch and saw that we had been flying for less than 34 minutes. We could not yet have reached Miami Beach. We should have been approaching the Bimini Islands. I told the controller that he must have identified another airplane and that we were approximately 90 miles southwest of Miami, still looking for Bimini. Suddenly, the fog started to break apart in a weird sort of electronic fashion.
What does that mean?
I honestly don't know, but that's how he described it.
I kind of take that as like static kind of looking. Not static, but like
an MTV static transition.
Yeah. Like an electronic fashion.
Yeah, I'm not super sure, but anyway, it broke apart in an electronic fashion is how he described it. He goes on to say, long horizontal lines appeared in the fog on either side of us. Within 8 seconds, all of the slits had joined, and the gray fog just disappeared. Then I saw the barrier island of Miami Beach directly below. After we landed in Palm Beach, I recognized that the flight had taken less than 47 minutes. I thought something must have been wrong with my airplane's timer, yet all 3 of our watches showed that it was 3:48 p.m.
So that's not possible.
No. This means that the entire 250-mile flight had taken only 47 minutes.
And at max, they were going 230.
Yeah.
For a lot of it, they were probably going 170, at least for the first 10 minutes.
Yeah. I think he noted earlier, I omitted this, but he said he put when they first took off, he put the cruise speed to the normal 180, 190-ish. Yeah. So the normal cruise speed for a Bonanza. Yeah. So the 250-mile flight took 47 minutes.
Yeah.
The Bonanza they were flying can't even come close to that, even at its maximum speed. If you firewall that thing, it's still going to take closer to twice that.
Yeah.
And what's even more remarkable is the specific gaps in time and space they noted, because he was navigating the whole time. Mm-hmm. So given his position where he should have been at point A, point B, etc.,
right.
What he claims is that they traveled through more than 100 miles and 30 minutes of time in a little more than 3 minutes.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
So is that 3 minutes when they were in that fucking tunnel?
I think so, yeah. When they were in that white haze.
The white haze, yeah.
And then when the fog the lines started to close in.
Yeah. And I remember we were talking about this yesterday. People kind of claimed, like, the whole, like, lines thing. If you've ever seen Star Wars, when they go into, like, hyperspace, the stars kind of turn to lines. But, like, looked it up out of curiosity. And this happened before any of the Star Wars movies came out.
Yeah,
so he couldn't have gotten that.
Yeah, 7 years before A New Hope.
Yeah, so he couldn't have gotten that from Star Wars.
Aha!
So it's almost kind of weird, though, that they match in that sense.
What does George Lucas know that we don't?
What if he just took it from this?
You know what? I like this guy. So that's really the end of that story, but what he describes, no one else has ever encountered or survived.
Yeah, because we can't say for sure, like, no one ever seen that, but if they did, they didn't survive it. Yeah. Or if they did, they didn't say anything.
Yeah, one of the biggest concrete piece or question that I have is just, even if he's making all this up, how did his plane go from the Bahamas to Miami Beach in 47 minutes?
Yeah, because it did.
Because it did.
Yeah, that was like, you can't dispute that fact. It happened.
No.
He took off there and landed there in 47 minutes from Bahamas to Miami.
Yeah.
In the plane that he had, which is not possible.
No.
So, no matter what you disregard about what he said, that's still, like, isn't a possible thing to do. So something funky still had to have happened.
Yeah. So that's all I have to say about that one. But that's just kind of it's been living rent free in the back of my mind.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Because I didn't even think about the fact that, like, you could disregard his entire statement, but you couldn't disregard the facts of when he took off and landed.
Yeah. You could just say, this guy's crazy, throw him in the loony bin. Yeah. But the question remains, how did he do it?
Airports keep track of when planes take off and, like, land, so they have those, like, numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
At this point, this is still pre-GPS, so they were using dead reckoning to navigate. So they know at specific times, I'm at this point at this time.
Yeah.
Kind of moving past that. There's still close to, honestly, dozens of...
It's a lot.
Just disappearances from planes.
There's a ton, but we obviously didn't include all of them.
Yeah, so multiple instances of passenger planes with 30 or 40 people traveling from Jamaica or some island going to the U.S. and just disappearing.
And no one's ever found, and no plane is ever found.
Yeah, the weird thing is none of them make distress calls. They just lose radio contact. They just disappear. Which
is the same thing that happened to Flight 19 even.
Yeah.
They were doing it, and then just lost radio contact and never heard from them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And same with the
one that went down, yeah.
Yeah, the rescue plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the one I will mention, though, is a lot shorter, but it's really just one single incident. This is a pilot named Irving Rivers, and on November 3rd, 1978.
Ooh. November 3rd.
November 3rd.
Don't forget to vote.
Yeah, vote.
Gotta vote. Rock the vote.
On November 3rd, 1978, a pilot for Eastern Caribbean Airways, Irving Rivers, was flying his Piper Navajo from St. Croix to St. Thomas. And it was a clear day. He had been cleared to land at the airport in St. Thomas. The control tower noted his blinking lights as he was on final approach just 1 mile out. They had visual contacts for his aircraft. He was coming in to land, routine flight.
1 mile is close.
1 mile is really close. That's shorter than the runway. The runway at St. Thomas is 7,000 feet long.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have way more pilot experience, but even the fucking simulators we flew at school for that class, you were done doing all your pre-landing stuff by 5 miles out.
Oh yeah.
1 mile out, you were you were good.
Yeah.
Either you were good or you were fucking abandoning.
Yeah.
But it was visual.
3 miles out for me is considered short final.
Yeah.
So 1 mile out, you're ready to land.
You're ready. You're in contact.
You're just lining up the lines.
They've seen you. Everything is set.
Yeah. So at this point, he had been cleared to land. ATC was in contact with him. They had visual contact.
Yep.
And his plane just disappeared. Yep.
Completely
vanished. So they didn't see it crash. They lost radio contact, and the lights just disappeared.
Dude, that's insane. He didn't turn away. He didn't
No.
He didn't abandon landing.
Nope. Didn't go around. Didn't do anything. And so search patrol was sent out immediately because they knew the plane's not here.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. And even just 1 mile out, that is a tiny search grade.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of in a lagoon shape almost, where you come into land, and it's not deep. So the fact that they never found the plane is beyond me.
That's insane.
And going, I guess, more in depth for the aviation nerds, mostly just myself, the Navajo is a twin-engine aircraft, which means that...
So it's got...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got 2 engines. So you can deal with a complete electrical failure.
What the fuck?
A full engine failure.
And you can still land.
You can still take off.
You shouldn't, but you could.
Yeah.
And especially, too, because even if that happened, right, it would have happened at that 1 mile out.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he would have told them that
they were in radio contact, yeah.
Yeah. So even if they went, honest to God, even if both engines failed,
you can still glide quite a bit.
You can glide that mile and land.
Yeah. Honestly, in a Cessna, you can glide. It's going to glide something like 7 or 8 to 1.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't actually know that. You can still glide in small planes pretty far if your engine goes out.
Engines are takeoff. Engines are mainly for takeoff.
Yeah, I actually just shut it off as soon as I reach my altitude. I just glide there.
Save gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The plane just disappeared. 1 mile out.
I love
just like that.
Weird side note about the whole takeoff thing. That I don't remember what class this was in. We were talking about the fact that wings are fully not needed to take off. You could just take that off without wings.
I mean, just put enough power behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just fun to think about a plane go down a runway with no wings and taking off.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, when we were learning about supersonic flow and stuff like that, you can just take off with a flat plate for a wing. It doesn't even need to be shaped.
That is true.
Yeah, just stick your arms out the windows.
But I mean, I guess basically just a rocket.
Yeah.
Taking off without wings.
Right.
Still though, it's fun with the image in your head of a plane with no wings taking off.
Strap a rocket to a pig, pigs will fly.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a weird one.
Yeah, just the fact that it was so close and it was just there 1 minute and gone the next.
And they never found anything.
No one saw a crash. No one saw anything.
No survivors, I assume.
No debris.
No debris at all.
No evidence of a crash.
Yeah, anybody on the fucking flight. Nope. Never found.
No.
Yeah. Was this a passenger aircraft?
So it was for a small regional airline, basically just island hoppers.
How many people were on it, though?
It's a 6-passenger aircraft.
Okay.
So it was just him.
Okay,
but
I was curious
it's a 6-passenger aircraft.
If there was passengers as well.
So I think he was going to pick up a flight.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it'd be I don't know, flying from St. Thomas, to the next island over.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I know what you're saying.
That's one of the other notable aviation ones that I had.
Yeah, that's a weird one for sure.
So then moving on to more the maritime side of things. Again, there's close to 50 like weird or suspicious losses noted. Yeah, a lot of them get pretty repetitive, so I'm going to count. I'm just going to go over a couple.
Yeah.
So the first one I'm going to cover was in 1918, and this is long before the Bermuda Triangle kind of came to be infamous.
Yeah, because Flight 19 kind of like made it sort of infamous.
Yeah.
And that was in 1945.
Right. So this was, again, suspicious incidents in the same area, but this is kind of before it was a widespread myth or
whatever you want to call it.
Mystery. Yeah. So in 1918, the U.S. Navy ship USS Cyclops was going from the Caribbean to Baltimore. It was the largest and the fastest fuel ship in the Navy, and it had a crew of 309 people on board.
That's a lot of people.
At some point, the ship just disappeared without a single trace. So despite searches, not a single thing was found. No life preservers, debris, lifeboats, or people.
That's insane in both these, the last one as well. No debris.
No, they just disappeared.
Because debris would mean some sort of crash.
Yep.
But zero debris, no bodies, no survivors.
Not even like a
life preserver, like which float, and sink. Like, that's nuts.
Yeah. And then another thing too is even though it was fully loaded with all the distress equipment that they thought it would needed and signals, there was no warning or no indication that anything happened. No radio calls, flares, anything that anyone saw. Nothing.
Yeah, and they would have definitely used a flare.
Yep. And radios at the very least.
Even if I'm saying the radios were fully out, they would use a flare.
Yeah.
Like, they don't just go down.
Yep.
And not just alert anybody at all.
Yeah. So it just vanished. So that one kind of lived in infamy for a little while.
Yeah.
They searched for it, but nothing was found, and they weren't really sure what else they could do about it. So then 2 decades later, 2 more Navy ships vanished in almost the same area, almost back to back. In 1941, the Uss Proteus was carrying 58 passengers and crew back from St. Thomas to the East Coast when it also just suddenly disappeared. The ship set sail November 23rd from the island. It was never heard from again.
That's so weird.
Yeah, no sign of the ship was ever found.
Never heard from after it set sail either.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird too.
Yeah, they didn't make any radio contact with anyone.
So, again, like, that just, like, makes me think they were having problems with, like, instrumentation, which seems to just be, like, a common theme when things go missing. Like, their instruments also go bad.
Right. So then so that was November 23rd when it set sail.
Yeah.
Only a few weeks later, the week of December 10th, its sister ship, the USS Nereus, also disappeared on the exact same route with the exact same circumstances, except this time it had a crew of 61, and as with the 2 previous ships, no trace of it was ever found.
The exact same route.
Same route, same circumstances.
That's insane.
Yeah. And again, no like foul weather is ever noted with those.
The thing is, like, with this one, I don't have like a theory of what's happening to them either. Like, I don't know where they're going.
I think that's why this is such a captivating phenomenon.
It's not like it's a conspiracy theory in a sense, but it's not like, oh, they're disappearing and here's what I think is going on. You're just like, they're disappearing and we have no fucking clue.
I think not knowing is definitely worse.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, not even having like an idea
of
where they're going.
There's so many of these where ships just disappear under the circumstances. But I'm going to go back to 1881 for one of the first ones I could find. Actually, the first one was in 1492 when Columbus was sailing through there.
And Christopher Columbus.
Yeah. I can retweet that.
Dude sucks.
And he noticed that their compasses were going haywire, and he claimed that the North Star was moving.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird.
Yeah.
Because it almost, like, in that sense, it almost seems like they're being, like, transported in a sense.
Yeah. That was like the first, but this is the first well-documented one that I could find. And actually, I think it's most interesting.
Okay.
So it's the case of the Ellen Austin. So it was a ship built in 1854 in Maine. It was a 210-foot schooner, which is basically just a large ship with multiple masts.
I don't know what a schooner
is. Yeah, it's just a big boat, which was pretty large for the time.
Oh, they had masts still?
Yeah.
I was like,
this was way back then.
Time ago.
Yeah. So it was pretty regularly going between Liverpool and New York. So it would go back and forth, pick up passengers and cargo, and just go back and forth.
Okay.
Also meant that it sailed over the Bermuda Triangle. In 1881...
What route did it take?
Oh, they would follow the shoreline down to where the thinnest point in the Atlantic is between the two.
Gotcha.
It was just a common sailing route.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I think they would also make stops along the way, like along the East Coast, too.
Oh, gotcha. I was going to say, in my head, I'm like, why the fuck is it ever going down there? That makes sense, though.
Yeah, so that was just the route that it took.
Okay.
So it was going over the Bermuda region. In 1881, when sailing from the UK to New York, it ran into another ship near the Sargasso Sea. I guess I shouldn't say ran into, but it just came across another
passed
ship.
each other.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, they didn't see anyone on board.
So this also, the Sargasso Sea is just a region near Bermuda.
Yeah.
To
So
make that clear.
It's just more specific than saying the Bermuda
Because
Triangle.
I didn't know what that was either.
Oh, I had to Google it.
Yeah.
I heard of it, but...
Yeah, I didn't know that it was basically in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they just passed another ship, and they didn't see anyone on it. And then they noticed that it was sailing pretty erratically and just seemingly aimlessly.
Mm-hmm.
So they sailed closer, and again, they found nobody on board, but it looked like it was still seaworthy. So
weird.
Yeah, so this is where things get really weird.
Yeah.
So upon closer inspection, there appeared to be nobody on board, and the captain of the Ellen Austin actually sent a salvage crew on board. So they went through the ship and also confirmed that there was not a single soul on board. The ship had no damage, there was no sign of violence, and it didn't appear that it had been through a storm. The only thing that they could think of that would be missing was the ship's nameplate. It just wasn't, it didn't have a name.
It's weird.
Yeah.
The storm thing threw me too, because especially back then with those boats, you would know if it had been through a storm.
Yeah.
They weren't horribly built, but they weren't a new boat. It's all you could go through hella shit and you'd never know. Yeah. You would know. So the fact that it never even been through a storm and it was missing its crew. Yeah. Threw me a little bit.
Yep. All of the other personal belongings, food rations, and at the time, extremely valuable mahogany cargo were all intact and untouched.
Interesting. The nameplate's just weird because why?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not it doesn't seem that important, but it's almost kind of eerie that the nameplate was missing.
Yeah, and what struck me too is the food rations. Because if they had to jump ship for whatever reason, why wouldn't you take any resources you need to survive? Yeah.
Yeah, you take the nameplate though.
they actually nailed that to their lifeboat.
Yeah. I don't think that would work. I think that'd sink the lifeboat.
So, due to the nature of the ship, so the valuable cargo, and honestly just another ship, the captain of the Ellen Austin ordered the salvage crew to guide the ship so they could all sail together to New York, and they started to do that. But as luck would have it, in the Bermuda Triangle, 2 days later, the ships were separated by a storm, and once the storm subsided, the unknown ship was nowhere to be found. So several days later, while also still sailing to New York, the Austin found the ship again. And there was
not the same ship?
Yep, the same unknown ship.
What the fuck?
That they had just been separated with. And there was not a single crew member on board.
Yo, what?
Yeah.
What?
So similarly to last time, everything was found to be intact despite the weathering from the storm. There was no sign of anything suspicious.
Except for the biggest sign of suspiciousness, which is what the fuck is this boat doing?
Yeah, right? This was, on a kind of a side note, all this was verified in 1944, decades after, when a retired British naval officer, Commander Rupert Gold, was researching the story.
I like that. I don't know. I
like
that
the most
name.
British name ever.
Rupert Gold.
He was researching the story and published a book that included the story, and he went over the events and turned up basically the proposition that the story happened just as all of the legends said it had.
Damn.
So he found things to back up all of these claims.
So yeah, he never found any discrepancies in the story, essentially.
No.
That's kind of wild.
He basically studied it and confirmed that, this is what I think happened.
Wow.
Kind of towards the end of the story, though, he also noted a few unverified statements that he had turned up. This almost adds more to it as well. So the following statements asserted that after the unknown ghost ship was found again, so after...
found the second time.
Found the second time, after the storm, the captain was trying to convince other sailors to still get on and sail it to New York, because you're going to come home with this huge cargo of mahogany plus a whole nother boat that they just found.
I mean, I get it, but also you'd think he'd be sketched. He probably wouldn't have done it himself.
Yeah. Oh, definitely not.
Because I'd be sketched out.
I would too.
The first time, it's a little bit sketchy when you find it, but who knows? Yeah. But the second time, when your crew goes and gets on, you get separated, and then you find it again somehow, which seems very unlikely in the first place. Yeah. And the crew's just gone a second time. I'd be like, fuck this boat. Yeah.
So one of the statements actually claimed that he was able to convince a second crew to go on board. And they did. and they started sailing again. And this time was a little bit longer, but it was still only 3 or 4 days before they got separated by a squall.
What's a squall?
Just a small storm.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were just never seen from again.
Jesus. This boat, man. What's that one, like, supposedly haunted boat? The Flying Dutchman?
Yeah.
It's the Flying Dutchman.
It's the Flying Dutchman.
No nameplate, just so you weren't sketched out by it.
Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean is actually a docuseries.
It is. It's been confirmed. Johnny Depp came out and said, and he's reputable.
Oh, yeah, very.
That it's all true.
Yeah, this one I think is...
Yeah, that's
just bizarre.
Super weird, dude.
Yeah.
Especially it was, like, all verified by, like, that guy going back and looking through and found nothing, like, to dispute any of it.
Yeah, British naval officer.
That's so fucking sketch, dude.
Yeah.
Because going back to the Columbus thing, it's just wild how that his compasses also fucked up, which just aligns with like every other story you hear when someone goes down, that their compass was like going haywire.
But again, going back to what we said earlier, there's no scientific reason why that would happen.
Zero reason. There's really nothing significant geographically about the Bermuda Triangle.
No, actually, the U.S. Geological Survey won't even recognize it as a region.
Yeah. I guess it's like there's a really deep point there.
The Puerto Rico Trench is the deepest point in the Atlantic.
Yeah. It's like what, like top 5 deepest in the world?
I think so, yeah.
So like that's like kind of significant, I guess, but first off, that wouldn't cause any of this.
No.
And like that's the only thing significant in that sense, but like there's no reason any of this should ever be like going down in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been kind of some assertions that like the magnetic compasses would be going haywire, but again, no reason.
No reason.
I've seen a couple things claiming that there's been like huge methane eruptions from the sea floor.
Yeah, I saw that too. But then you saw...
Yeah, so then there's a couple things there. So first of all, that could theoretically sink a ship if suddenly a ship was just enveloped in bubbles.
Yeah, first off, it wouldn't affect a plane.
But it wouldn't affect a plane. Another thing I was thinking too would be that maybe like an engine on a plane wouldn't be able to combust the methane. But how long are you flying through that eruption?
That would be so small amount of time, I would think.
Yeah, and again, you would still have like the distress calls and that kind of thing. They don't just disappear. But then I also found something also by the U.S. Geological Survey, a report that was kind of debunking the whole methane thing, claiming that there hasn't been a notable eruption of methane in that region in the last 15,000 years.
Yeah. So none of these stories you could ever attribute to that.
Yeah, so out of all of the theories I've seen about this, they're just that, they're theories. There's no actual substantial evidence to corroborate any of that.
And that goes both ways in this situation. Like,
it does.
There's no really way to debunk a lot of them. But there's also like no theory on what's happening to them when they disappear.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of one of those situations where it's kind of like, it's less of, here's 2 theories, or like 2 things like that we think are going on. It's more like, weird shit's going on.
Yeah.
Nobody knows why. Like, you can either think there's practical reasons, or you can think like it's some sketchy ass shit.
Yeah, like going through all the ones that I just read, out of all of those, I have no idea what's going on. I don't even have an idea of, okay, I think this happened.
Yeah, no.
It's just, all I know is this plane disappeared, and there's no explanation for that.
Yeah, 0. I'm definitely on the side of no idea what it is, but I can't, at least at the moment, come up with any reasonable explanation. So I feel like it's got to be something that I just like, that I wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
At least yet. Because that's how science works.
Science.
Maybe eventually we'll understand what's going on.
Yeah,
but at the moment, I have no idea. I also, especially since this one is kind of like very open-ended, I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Oh yeah, let
like
us
if
know.
any of you guys have like either a theory or like anything like that, you can text us because again, you probably know us, and if not, you can all like DM the page, the Instagram page, like if you have an idea, if you're like, I think this is what happened to the plane that disappeared a mile off the runway.
Yeah.
Like, would love to hear it because I'm very curious. Because even most of the articles we found also had like no explanation. They just kind of like laid out facts.
Yeah, they're just that they're articles. Like, here's what happened, and
that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to let us like hear your theories, if that's what you want to call them, I would very much enjoy reading that. We would very much enjoy reading that.
And honestly, kind of on that note too, if we missed anything or if we like glossed over anything,
yeah, if there's something you know about, like have heard about, then like also, I obviously we don't have enough people, but it'd be super fun if we got like enough responses on theories to like get together and like read them and talk about them as like maybe like a mini episode or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be a nice little side project.
I don't think we have enough followers for that, But if enough people, like, we get, like, a good amount of listens, honestly. Not a good amount, it's small, but, like, more than we expect. I haven't checked the page recently, but the last episode, we had, like...
It's pretty widespread.
It got out there, like, decently.
Yeah.
The last time we checked, it's been, like, a week. There was, like, 60 total listens between the 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Just a thought. If anybody wants to shoot us a message saying what they think's fucking going on.
I guess on that note, though, we can wrap it up. But yeah, thanks for listening to us. Just rant for an hour.
Yeah, for real. Like we said, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're on both. Link is on our Instagram page, the.rabbitholepod. Also, the page you can DM for theories. We don't have like a picture we talked about this time to post. So
no, we'll find one.
Yeah, we'll find a picture to make a.
Yeah, maybe Flight 19 or something.
Could do Flight 19. Yeah. Google Bermuda Triangle. Go to images and see what comes up.
Just a screenshot of Google
the triangle itself.
Yeah, just a triangle and then the words Bermuda.
Just any random triangle. Yep. So we're gonna post that. This should be uploaded. What is tomorrow? Friday the 30th.
Yeah.
Should be uploaded that day.
Yep.
At least.
And yeah. All right. At that point, we'll drop it off. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Rabbit Hole.